You know, it's kind of weird to think about, but I still have this $250 collector's edition for Cyberpunk. Look how massive this is. What am I supposed to do? You know what? I'll put it right... Of course, it instantly freaking breaks. Well, that's what Cyberpunk does best. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and today we're going to be talking about Cyberpunk, but in a very different style, which is that supposedly there is a huge new leak from an angry game developer, somebody who's actually working on the game, who wanted it to be fantastic, but it just got completely screwed in the process. So I want to take a look at this. It's actually over here on Gaming Leaks and Rumors, the subreddit. Now, if you've ever been here, half of this Reddit is very legit. There is some crazy freaking stuff that manages to come out here. Some really huge news stories are actually dropped in this subreddit. But some of this stuff is complete freaking BS. Some of this is the dumbest trash on the internet. Now, already I've gone through this post, and it seems like it might be at least partially legit. Some of the stuff in here has me definitely excited for the game in a couple months. Now, it's all being written by this guy who's claiming that right now the game is being finalized, and we could be seeing an update, an upgrade, basically an all-new version of Cyberpunk in June. Let's take a look at it, and I want to try and break down what he's saying, what I think it means, and if this could be real for Cyberpunk. CD Projekt Red hurt themselves to keep investors safe and sound. Now devs are hearing plans of a No Man's Sky style comeback due in late June. The first two patches should come out mid-March, despite what's being said by top execs. Now, this is the part that seems a little bit interesting to me, which is that right now a lot of the public statements and stuff have been saying, all right, we're going to come out with a huge Cyberpunk patch in January, another huge patch in February. This guy is already saying, we're working on patches, but they're coming in March. Now, here's something that's definitely the most eye-catching to me. Dev morale is at an all-time low. Sony is roasting our asses due to the gigantic volume of refund requests. There will be major departures from the studio in the coming months. Now, this seems real. I hate to say this. Honestly, I think an aspect of the Cyberpunk dumpster fire that we don't consider is the fact that it's being made by actual people. There are freaking game developers over in Poland who have been clocking in 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week for the last couple years trying to get this game completed, working on art, finishing all the glitches, trying to make sure the game is as playable as possible, and it came out in this completely broken state. But these people still love what they've made. The fact that it got rushed at the last second because their bosses are such freaking morons, I understand why people are probably considering quitting and taking an easier job at another studio. Where this post starts feeling the most legit is in these direct quote sections, like this one right here. There's no finger pointing as of now. Word on memos comes from the top. The directors and senior devs are taking the flak for the team in what I'd call an honorable move. Just so you know, we still joke about a quest that got rewritten more than a dozen times because a certain top dog wasn't feeling it. It ended up being cut from the final product and should come later to DLC next year. Now, this right here is where this starts to sound the most legit, which is the fact that it sounds like people are still kind of jovial at times. People are still kind of chill inside the studio because they realize, these people are able to take a step back and realize that the game is currently still a completely broken mess on base consoles. PS4, old school Xbox, the VCR, it's just completely in tatters. But I think that they are not trying to lie to themselves. The game developers and the management realize that Cyberpunk is not as good as it should have been. There's people that are getting hired for whatever reason to stay in the company due to being trusted by the top dogs. A good chunk of code is getting scrapped and rewritten from scratch. The intended game might be ready by June 2021. Now, this part sounds like BS. Every time I've talked to people that are coders, people who are actually trying to make games, you're very, very slow to scrap code. I mean, that's basically saying I got a flat tire, so I ripped out the chassis of my car and decided to put in an all-new freaking drive shaft. Like, it's basically saying you're destroying part of the game in order to remake it. This is the part that sounds fishy. It's already done and ready since February. It didn't get implemented because of a major UI bug that's still present in the retail copies. If you open your .dat files, you'll find a lot of scrapped content still in there. If you want a refund, please ask for it. It positively impacts us as devs because we've warned the leads a million times about this kind of Most cosmetic overhauls should be ready by the second big update. This update is due out in June and will sort all sorts of bugs. The code for the PS4 and Xbox One is getting scrapped and done separately. PS5's code is an improvement on the PC due to the awesome dev kits Sony put together. Now, again, as much as there's sections of this that seem legit, as much as the source is correct in certain aspects, this talk of scrapped code, this is where things sound the most fishy. Now, I do believe that Sony probably gave them the best development kits available. Mostly because, obviously, they wanted the PlayStation 5 to be an absolute banger, right? Obviously, we know this. There's been tons of leaks already basically saying that Sony has been going to people years ago even and saying, we need you to have the best PlayStation 5 games available. So the fact that this is Sony giving them the top resources to make sure that Cyberpunk's PlayStation 5 version is fantastic, that part sounds legit. You'd be amazed by how much is already done. That cut content so people finish the main quest talk was BS. Oh, that's so interesting. Most apartments with locked or closed doors, these were used to be lootable. We've scrapped about 50,000 lines of dialogue. I believe the June update will bring a whole lot of cut content back into the game. So this is definitely the most interesting thing in all of this freaking leak, is the fact that there's been so much speculation that there are sections of the city that are way too empty. Like right here, this is some of my own raw recorded gameplay right here. There are chunks of the city that look good, that play well. There's parts of the city that have enemy encounters and stuff, but they're still incredibly empty. As much as I love Night City, actually, you know what? The more I kind of play this game, it's still a broken mess, but I kind of appreciate what they did get right. I mean, yes, this game is still a completely undefendable mess in certain aspects, but Night City as an idea has some cool concepts in it. The fact that this developer is basically saying that they wanted to make the city a lot more expansive, a lot more improved, and honestly, a lot more finished, this part is what grabs my attention the most. Now, the rest of this here is actually a lot of talk about the cut content, and here's what I want to really focus on. I fully believe that Cyberpunk was supposed to be better. Like, 100%, Cyberpunk was clearly intended to be a 100-hour-long game with a lot of very interesting details in it. And the reason I say this is because if you actually look at the game itself, there was so much potential. There's so many sections of this freaking world that clearly were meant to be bigger and filled with side quests and a lot of the spell effects and stuff. When I see explosions and cars flying around and stuff, it seems like this was supposed to be a lot freaking bigger, but they just reduced the idea at the last second. So this talk about cut content, that's what gets me the most excited. Addressing the cut content, if you see you guys are talking about to be put back in the game, we might actually make the game we intended back in 2018. There used to be a huge underground part of the city that the public never got to see because it looked ugly to the executives. It was effing awesome. It felt like a Malkavian Nosferatu path in Vampire the Masquerade. I don't want to hate on Keanu, but effing hell, our original Johnny was way cooler and sounded like a maniac. Think Full Test on crack. I don't appreciate his acting either, but he's a very nice man. Walked up to us personally to greet us the first day, took time to personally thank every one of us when the game wrapped up recording. This part right here seems very real to me because honestly, it's just difficult to imagine like Keanu Reeves being a jerk. I don't particularly love him in the game. I think his voice acting is kind of mid, but Like, the fact that he seems to be so chill, and right here they even say that they didn't pay him a super crazy amount. It's not like they paid him $20 million or whatever. That's pretty cool. Our original Johnny was heavily inspired by David Hayter's Solid Snake from the first Metal Gear Solid, and believe it or not, Cillian Murphy. So interesting to think about the fact that originally they want him to be a much more rough and tumble hero or anti-hero. That's an interesting idea. And at this point, I don't think that can come back. I think that this is going to be like Destiny. Remember, Destiny originally had freaking, Game of Thrones actors in it and stuff, and that was all cool, but they had to cut those lines. They replaced all that voice acting. They don't want to bring them freaking back. I think that everything we've gotten so far from Keanu, I don't think there's going to be any extra Keanu except for the already recorded lines. I don't think they're going to be putting in new storylines. He's not going to be playable in extra sections. I think that everything we've seen from Reeves thus far is all that's ever going to exist. But getting back to this part right here, there was whole AI routines for the minor gang violence in those areas. Stuff you could sit back and watch unfold directly influence. There were priests and Hare Krishna side arcs that got cut due to censorship. Miles wrote a whole side quest where a tax officer offered himself and you could take its place, but it was created to such a complex detour to everything totally that it got cut. So this is the part that's so interesting to me, is it sounds like so much of this game just ended up on the cutting room floor. This is one of the major complaints I've seen people talk about. Now, I did not personally have a problem with this, but I have seen a lot of people say that they think the cop AI, the gang AI, the enemies are dumb as balls. And it sounds like in certain aspects of this game, they planned for them to be more intelligent, but they had to reduce the scope to get the game done out on time. The idea, though, of this specifically, the idea of getting a chance to be a cop and a super cop at that, this is a concept I really wish had gotten to be explored, because that sounds juicy as hell. So the last section I want to read right here, this last part I want to read right here is actually the section I think is probably going to get quoted the most if this story ends up spreading around, which is a talk about the disastrous launch. Because, look, if you love this game, if you hate this game, if you think it's just kind of whatever, I think we can all agree that this was a colossal freaking mess up when it came to the release. There was way too much hype, there was way too many delays, there was way too much last minute misinformation. It's been a crazy mess, but it's interesting to see the words of a developer themselves. Might sound weird, but the disaster launch was actually something beneficial from our perspective. A cold shower sets priorities straight, and we were able to resume work on what was originally intended without having those efforts breathing down our necks to publish. I believe it was due to miscommunication and leads not setting goals like they should. The game was jumbled together from E3's 2019. The last dev comp was scrapped was 160 gigs alone. There should have been some whistleblowing in the coming weeks if the steps down. What? This guy talks like he's having a freaking stroke, but clearly what he's saying is that they were trying to make different last-minute versions of the game. Some that were bigger file types, some that were tinier file types. They weren't able to properly compress it, though. They weren't able to make this the tiniest, streamlined, actually final experience that we probably hoped. But here is where things get the most fascinating, which is that Series X is apparently got a lot of stuff ready. Next-gen architecture is actually very good for ports. It's a company policy to release a game when it runs without debug hitches, and the reason why it did baffles me, is the reason why I started this thread. It's a mix of hubris and deep incompetence from some big names around here. I'm going home for the holidays and really thinking about my friends who will be in the office for the next couple months redoing scrapped work. Next E3 will be bizarre for CD Projekt Red, I bet. Alright, so what does this actually mean? Like, if we really just take a step to the side, if we try and digest this data, what does it mean? Honestly, parts of this are real. And what I mean by that is, I think that this game is being completed. I think that it will come out in a finalized state someday. I hope that we see a huge update in June, that to me would be fantastic. As of now, I've decided to quit Cyberpunk 2077. I'm not going to play the game anymore. I'm not going to be picking up the controller until the game is actually finalized. When we get the next-gen version, the true PlayStation 5 release, the final version of the Xbox Series X, because I do own it on both consoles, I'm curious to see what that looks like. When this game is actually feature complete, I'll go back and play a bunch more hours of it, because I still think that this has pretty much unlimited potential. Yes, let's face it, Cyberpunk lied to you. CD Projekt Red, they looked you in the eyes and they sold you a spoonful of diarrhea and they told you that it was cotton candy. This is a mess. It is a mess that's going to stay a mess for quite a while after this. But I still think that from here, things might get bigger. Things might get better. Things might actually find a way to improve. And when that happens, I will come back. I've already paid for the game. I might as well get some time out of it. They have also said that I believe that all the downloadable content is going to be free. I'm curious about that. I'm curious to see what this game shapes up into. But as of now, as I've already stated, don't buy it. Wait, this game is just going to get bigger and better and hopefully more polished in 6 months or a year. Can they do the No Man's Sky process? I'm hopeful. I mean, I still think that with all the billions of dollars they have and with all the talent they have, on a long enough timeline, eventually this will be some sort of masterpiece. But right now, it's still a bit of a scrambled chunk of code. These have just been my thoughts. What do you think about this leak? Do you think this is real? Do you think it's completely fake? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. You know, I actually had a completely different video I was sitting down to film today about why I hate the rumors about the PlayStation 5 Pro. You know what, if this video gets like 2,000 likes, I will go ahead and film that. Maybe I'll actually put that out today. Maybe I'll put it out tomorrow. But I want to kind of rant about the freaking fake as hell PlayStation 5 Pro rumors because those are ridiculous. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.